In my last video, I talked about the fall of Nylum Gaming the summer of 2015 and how that sort of led to some interesting ramifications over the course of 2016 and going into 2017. With Hiko going to Team Liquid, not Optic, but Automatic going to Cloud9, and then Optic, Valence, and Semphis doing okay, having one really good event or one good event, maybe not really good, at ECS Season 1. Now, a similar sort of breakup also had some interesting effects in 2016. But instead of thinking about it in sort of this unfortunate, tragic context, what Nylum could have been, this other breakup, the breakup of Elevate and Tempo Storm, led to some really fortunate results. Sort of this fortunate break after fortunate break, and just the talent of both teams condensing and adding in with new talent over time, and it eventually leads to Optic. Now, I guess maybe you could even argue that Nylum's breakup was fortunate because the talent got dispersed and a bunch of other teams became successful, but it's sort of tragic those teams were never that Nylum team wasn't successful in the first place. But yeah, the formation of Optic, I really do think, is a series of very fortunate events, and sort of just their luck ran out. It just seems like they fell upwards in a weird way with a series of moves. And then, eventually the sort of luck ran out, and then Stanislaw left the team, and then they've sort of been struggling since then. But let's look at the series of fortunate moves or series of fortunate events that led to the formation of Optic. So first, what happened was in August 2015, after the first ESEA/ESL Pro League season. That's what they called it for the first Pro League season, ESL Pro League Season 1. It was actually called ESEA/ESL. But yeah, after that season ended, both Elevate and Tempo Storm decided to drop their CSGO lineups. Now, I actually think the Elevate organization, I think they didn't, they just stopped, they just ceased function. But the Tempo Storm organization obviously kept going. They just dropped the CSGO roster at the time. And, eventually they picked up the guys who would later become Immortals, the sort of the second best Brazilian team, that sort of team they had. And that was later in the opening months of 2016, or the first 5 or 6 months of 2016. But yeah, both organizations decided to drop these rosters basically at the same time, which allowed in this very fortunate, lucky way the combination of talents. Now, these two teams were like maybe the 5th and 6th best North American team. You have teams like CLG, Cloud9, Liquid, Nylum, sort of up there. There's also Luminosity at the time, not the Luminosity who later become SK, but a different Luminosity team. They actually got dropped as well by Luminosity, so they could pick up Keyd Stars, or the team. Yeah, the team that eventually become Luminosity and eventually become SK, the best Brazilian team. Now, these two teams, they were just decent, maybe had some talents. Had Shazam, who was formerly on Cloud9, and they had Daps, who was, Shazam was on Tempo Storm, and Daps was on Elevate. But, Daps was previously on Liquid, so they had some maybe known names, but not super promising, not super well-known guys in any respect at this time. Now, on Elevate, the roster, when they were right at the end, was XP3, Aegis, Daps, Rush, and Nafly. Now, XP3 and Aegis recently sort of surfaced with Muffin Lightning at the Third Americas Minor, but XP3 and Aegis haven't had as much success as these guys had, or it's been as promised the other three guys, Daps, Rush, and Naf, because they obviously formed sort of the core of this Conquest team. Daps decided to grab Rush, who's sort of this promising, aggressive entry player for the team. Rush was also previously on Tempo Storm, but he was sort of back and forth, and Daps decided to bring him into the team, keep him, because he, valued him as a player, and he kept him going into, eventually, they actually created sponsor list first, but they'd eventually become Conquest. So he kept Rush and Nafly. Nafly was also sort of a promising player, not a super aggressive rifler, but seen as a very skilled player. Maybe his output was very variable, but he was a good secondary opper, had a lot of skill with some with various weapons. He was a good rifler, good with Yop. So he had some promise, and he's still a young guy. Yeah, he still is a young guy, and he has had some good performances internationally. So it seems like a decent pickup on that front. Now from Tempo Storm, the team was Rix, Shazam, Stanislaw, Roca, and Automatic. Automatic just left Nylum because of some sort of internal issue between Hiko and Automatic. So what happened was that Complexity actually took up Roca and Automatic. Roca and Automatic joined Complexity. Now Complexity would sort of be the basically Nylum, but with Roca instead of Hiko. And eventually, they also would get the coach of Elevate, I think. Yeah, I think Warden was coaching Elevate, but Warden would eventually rejoin Complexity. He was famously a part of the the early Complexity lineups in 1.6. So he would join as the coach and eventually become a player when Valens would step down or retire from being a pro player. But yeah, it's basically those two teams would compete. The Nylum core that would become Complexity and sort of these fifth and sixth best North American teams. They fuse together, and these two teams, Complexity and Conquest, would become sort of challenge for the fourth best American team. Best North American team, the team that could still attend lands. They weren't part of the big three. They weren't part of Cloud9, Liquid, or CLG, but they could still be relevant. They could still attend lands. They could still maybe even do okay at lands, but not at the top end of the scene. So there, it was like the fourth best team could sort of still attend these international tournaments. They just but maybe the fifth or the sixth best couldn't. So this is like a big, this is like the breaking point, I would say, to be the fourth best North American team. So those two teams sort of struggle. Now, who the Conquest guys would pick up was actually Shazam and Rix. They actually didn't pick up Stanislaw. Stanislaw would go to Team Coast. Now, Rix was also sort of another aggressive rifle player, and then not Stanislaw, but Shazam was obviously has always been an opper. He was opper for Cloud9 previously. So this sort of nice role balance with the two aggressive riflers with Rush and Rix. Nafly and Dap sort of being more middling, slower players, and then you have an opper in Shazam. Now this team would do well online, but pretty quickly into their formation together, they would actually decide to drop Rix for Stanislaw, and I don't know if anyone's definitively said why that happened. Why Rix was asked to leave the team. Maybe it was an internal conflict. Maybe just they didn't think he was a good enough player. Now they actually, it was actually very fortunate, just like how it was very fortunate these two teams broke up at the same time. It was very fortunate that they kicked Rix when they kicked Rix, that Stanislaw, who was formerly the in-game leader of Tempo Storm, happened to be available, because it was a very weird circumstance. He just didn't leave Team Coast to join this Conquest team. He was a part of Coast, and there's some sort of weird he was actually you gotta remember about Stanislaw too, is he's sort of like the reject, like the sort of these teams that are competing to be the fourth best, this important fourth best slot. He wasn't asked to join either of these two teams. He wasn't asked to join Complexity and wasn't asked to join Conquest. He went to Team Coast, who was sort of had some lesser players on that team, and there was some sort of weird conflict where the players on that Coast team tried to change their ESEA roster, but without the permission of the actual Coast organization, which sort of led to some sort of issue, and ESEA allowed the Team Coast organization to make their own changes, but they didn't allow Stanislaw to still be on that team. So Stanislaw was sort of just released from Team Coast because ESEA wouldn't allow him to be on that roster anymore, to be in that season, that upcoming season. So it was just perfect timing, and Stanislaw was added to this team, and they actually were better. What they said, I saw Dap say in interviews, they wanted like a second guy who could bounce ideas off of another like brain, another guy who thought about the game like he did, like someone who could add some sort of tactical element to the team, or be a good like caller in the secondary CT site, to organize the players in the secondary CT site. This was the benefit, but it sort of messed up the roles a little bit because now you have a lot of sort of typically slower, more not like super effective aggressive riflers on the team with Stanislaw, Nafly, and Daps. And then you have an Opper and Shazam, and you sort of have this one really aggressive rifler in Rush, which sort of leads to a conflict later. But they actually end up doing pretty well with Stanislaw. They attend two lands together, two important lands together, two international lands together. They also attend other lands, but two sort of important international lands together. SIVO Season 8 and ESL Pro League Season 2, the finals of ESL Pro League Season 2, the offline finals. Now, SIVO, I don't know if people were around back then watching this video now, but there was this really weird scenario where it was really late at night during the group stage of this SIVO LAN, and there were sort of these very young fans, or like young teenagers, young teen fans, up very late at night screaming their heads off at this SIVO group stage, and it was like it went super late, game 3 with overtimes and stuff between Conquest and Dignitas, and this decides who gets out of their group, and sort of in this really weird late night crazy. Maybe some people said those fans were obnoxious. Some people just say they're very enthusiastic and sort of engaging and sort of. It's a good example of what a fans could be, super engaged, super excited. But, it was like, this was sort of the storyline of that group stage. It was sort of this weird environment, this weird milieu, late night, with this sort of weird but collected energy in these fans. And Conquest actually beat Dignitas. And Dignitas was a much better team, or considered to be a much better team worldwide at the time. They had, like, Pimp, Kierby, Tensky, MSL, like this sort of era of Dignitas. So they actually just went on to the group stage, went past the group stage and made it to the playoffs of an international tournament. Now, it wasn't the most stacked international tournament by any means, but it was a good. This is a pretty big deal for sort of the fourth best American team. Best North American team to do anything other than find a group stage exit. For the fourth best North American team, they just want to get to the lands. That's how that's maybe an accomplishment in itself to get past the online qualifiers. Now they're actually going to lands and doing well. In this one specific land, they did well. So this is pretty exciting. But the next ESL Pro League land they attend, they didn't make it out of the group stage. They lost to Liquid and another team. Maybe First Pro. Yeah, I think they beat Liquid and Dignitas to make it out of the group stage of the SIVO LAN. But yeah, they didn't. They went 0-2 and didn't make it out of the group stage of the ESL Pro League Season 2 finals. So they ended up doing sort of decent online to be able to attend these events. Not amazing yet, but they hit another really fortunate. Maybe you want to say that they were really fortunate to get sort of this weird environment at the SIVO LAN, but they're also very, very fortunate again at this E-League qualifier. Now it was going to be like a online. It was mainly that qualifier to make it into the first E-League season was mainly online, and then there'd just be a best of 3 offline. And Optic. What happened was that the Conquest guys entered this online qualifier, and they actually had a really easy time of it. They got all the lucky breaks. They didn't have to face Cloud9, CLG, Liquid. Those teams all lost in the online qualifiers. Optic or Conquest got a really easy run to the finals of this. I think they played Complexity, who was pretty much broken up at the time because they're thinking about adding Fraud, and Semphis and Automatic wanted to leave, and they of course left to join TSM eventually. So they maybe weren't they were a dead team. They weren't going to play together any longer. So Conquest faced them first, and they played like Dogmen, who's a team that also wasn't especially notable, and then they played Enemy in the finals of that sort of online qualifier for the E-League for this. It's like, I think it was the E-League game show qualifier is what they called it. It was just a best of 3 between Optic and another team. But when Conquest beat Enemy, that's how they got the Optic sponsorship. They got this really fortunate bracket on this very important tournament. It was a qualifier for a very important tournament, and just getting that far to get to make it through to the offline finals of that qualifier was enough to get the OpTic's sponsorship. And this, of course, was very fortunate for them because now they have the capital, now they have the resources. It's not just this upstart conquest organization who's never done anything in esports before. It's this well-funded Call of Duty org who now picks them up. Like FaZe is another Call of Duty well-funded org, and now they're doing well in CSGO as well. So this was really good for OpTic, and then this sort of led them to have capital and make some pickups later, like Mixwell and Tarek. Now, it's also another really fortunate thing, just like I was saying before, how the roles worked out, because what happened was that there just wasn't enough aggressive players. They didn't have the easy way to start rounds. This was sort of a flaw with their team. So they were trying to get Shazam to be more aggressive and make more early peaks earlier in rounds with the op. But that sort of just led to some personality conflicts, and maybe there's just personality conflicts in general between these players. And Shazam just couldn't do this role, wouldn't do this role. So they actually picked up. So Shazam was dropped from the team. That caused some minor drama because he revealed that Daps lied or was, he basically just lied and said that he had a family issue. When he just overslept for the DreamHack Austin qualifier, which is about April of last year. So Shazam said they were just grinding money in FPL and they stayed up too late in something like this, which is maybe seems like a different point of view or exaggeration of the truth, or maybe there was more truth. But from Daps' point of view, it didn't have a lot of truth to it. He just overslept. Didn't have anything to do. Well, the reason they were grinding FPL was because they decided to kick Shazam, but they hadn't effective yet, so they weren't practicing. They were just playing a bunch of FPL and trying to make some money that way. But yeah, anyway, that sort of led to some minor drama. You might remember that. But anyway, they pick up Mixwell, it actually ended up being very, very fortunate because not only did they fit the role, he was like a hybrid opper / rifler, and in either weapon, he would frequently make these sort of weird plays, these aggressive plays early in rounds or in sort of slowly prod for the first minute of round and sort of get the opening for OpTic. And he ended up being their star player. He ended up massive. I don't know if massively. I think pretty strongly exceeding expectations. Maybe not massively, but he sort of became the star of this team. So it was a very, very good pickup for them. So they got sort of very lucky again. And then with Mixwell, they ended up having some better results. They won the second America's Minor. They beat Tempo Storm, the new Tempo Storm team, who's like the second best Brazilian team, the team that became Immortals eventually, with Henny and Lucas and all those guys, Bolts, Phelps, all those guys. They beat them in 2 best-of-3 series to win that minor. Then they went to the ESL 1 Cologne main qualifier. They did well there. They made it out of that Swiss, and they made their first major together. Now, they didn't do well at the major, which led to further roster change, but just this sequence of events, like with getting Mixwell, just like all these roster changes sort of just one led into the other, starting from, and then just very fortunate with just the way that org sort of acted weirdly at the very beginning in 2015 with Coast and Elevate and Tempo Storm, just the breakups and the sort of the weird politics of the scene just sort of led to this. So this is a uprise. But what was really fortunate was what Tarek was added to the team. They actually decided to kick Stanislaw. Now, maybe there's a pretty good argument you want to keep Nafly there because he's sort of a pretty inconsistent player. You saw him have his upside in Game 3 of the E-League Season 2 finals versus Astralis, but that obviously it didn't happen yet. Maybe there's an argument to kick Nafly rather than Stanislaw, but there's apparently some sort of internal conflict that Daps hinted at in his sort of post later when he got removed from OpTic, but. Yeah, Stanislaw was originally kicked from the team, which is probably not the best move. But then sort of some weird internal politics later, they decided to not kick Stanislaw. They decided to bring back Stanislaw and just kick Daps instead, which is a move that was heavily criticized because now they're lacking an in-game leader. But Stanislaw, of course, was originally an in-game leader, so he was slotted into that role, and they ended up having a lot more success. Now, the roles worked out. They didn't have to rely so much on Mixwell to make sort of these early picks into the first minute to minute 15 of the round. They could play more. They can have their aggressive riflers and now Rush and Tarek sort of make moves at the beginning at any point of the round. They can play with pace more. Stanislaus sort of diversified their tactical toolbox. Now he had better, he had more opportunity, he had more things. He didn't have just putting in Mixwell areas to succeed. He could also rely on Rush, and Rush obviously surged in form towards December as they had those two good tournaments with E-League and ECS. But yeah, he sort of had more tools. He sort of developed the T size. He was also better individual fragger than Daps. So I mean, now he's sort of become one of the most valuable North American players, and he was rejected multiple times. He was rejected when Tempo Storm got split between Complexity and Conquest, and they got rejected by Coast, or he just was left. He somehow got unluckily removed from that team, and now he was going to be removed from OpTic as well. And then he sort of becomes the most valuable North American player because he was good at sort of this weird lurking position on OpTic while also being the in-game leader. He could sort of do some weird like mental plays, get the most out of his game, sort of cut off rotators. As sort of this weird, lurking role where you try to like very quickly chase rotators from the opposite side that they were attacking, and he becomes super valuable and helped OpTic have one of the best runs of any North American team ever. I mean, this was right up there with the Cloud9 summer run and the run they had early in, after, say, like September, October in 2016, where they picked up Automatic and they were good at tournaments like Star Ladder Season 2, DreamHack Bucharest, and obviously ESL Pro League Season 4, where they actually won that tournament. So, with those two really good Cloud9 runs, this OpTic run where they won Northern Arena in Montreal, the one E-League, and then second place at ECS Season 2, now there's a bad DreamHack in there as well. But, this is also a very, very good run for a North American team. This has sort of just happened because of these weird sequence of events, just sort of this natural sort of progression of getting better every time. Just one circumstance leads to the other. Now, their luck ran out when sort of internal conflicts or some sort of issue within the team that's never been super specified by Stanislaus led to Stanislaus leaving and going to Liquid. Now, that move has obviously been pretty devastating for OpTic. They haven't looked good in 2017. Now, they also had some weird factors go against them to go into the major with like Mixwell not having his visa or having some visa issues, and sort of all the North American and South American teams going to Europe to practice. So OpTic didn't really have a practice partner going into the major. So that also was pretty unfortunate in this just the way that the moves have worked out in 2017 just has worked against OpTic. But it's just this long series of very fortunate events that led to sort of this great run. And it's sort of sort of just contrasting that to Nylum, whose breakup, the players spread. Instead, the breakup of Tempo Storm and Elevate sort of led to this constant this compact, this combination, this talent being compressed within this sponsorless / Conquest / OpTic team that ended up being very successful for a very limited time at the end of 2016. Okay, that's sort of the end of the video, and that's sort of the end of this two-part series where I talk about these interesting breakups in 2015. Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think these two breakups had some major ramifications and still, sort of shaped the North American scene to this day.